everyone, and we're back live here in Amsterdam, MEF Connects Business Messaging 2022. If you've only just joined us, a very warm welcome to all of you here with me, because I've seen some new people who've just arrived, and also to many hundreds of you online watching around the world. We're going to continue our packed 2 days of business messaging with a topic that I actually really like. It came to the attention of MEF last October. One of the working groups I've got the pleasure of running is the Future of Messaging Fraud and Revenue Assurance group. And in there, this topic of A2P voice flash calling came up. And it was very clear last October that very few MEF members, never mind people across the industry around the world, whether it was mobile network operators or other stakeholders, actually knew what this thing was. So it therefore gives me great pleasure to moderate today a session looking at this growing area of A2P voice flash calling. And joining me on stage in person is Igor Skutsenya. So give Igor a hand. Thank you. He's back. A very warm welcome, Igor. So Igor is a business development manager with anti-fraud services, so very relevant. I'm going to be using this. Apparently there are issues with my headset, but the show must go on. So Igor has joined us, business development manager, anti-fraud services with LANCK Telecom, and joining me now is John Murtagh, who is the director of telco products for Infobip. He's joining us online from Ireland. Now, this session is sponsored by Infobip. John, nice to have you with us.
Good, great to be here, James. And once again, apologies for not being able to make it in person.
No problem, no problem. These things are unavoidable, but lovely having you with us. Also joining us on this session is Sam Barker, who is the head of analytics and forecasting for Juniper Research. Sam, is Sam with us?
I am here, but virtually.
You are, perfect. So we have some time together looking at this whole issue. We're going to have a really frank and robust discussion after. But first of all, there are going to be a number of people in the room and lots of people online who are going, what is A2P voice flash calling? So here to set the scene to Infobip's sponsored session here at MEF Connects Business Messaging is John. John, take it away, sir. You've got a presentation for us.
Yes, thank you, James. It's great to be here. And again, apologies for not being able to make it. So what is A2P voice or flash calling? First of all, we need to look at what is happening up at the enterprise consumer level. So what's really happening is in the world of business messaging, there is a huge element to do with authentication or phone number verification. And this is what the enterprise is essentially engaging with the user to do. So that is done either for sign up or for two-factor authentication reasons. We have traditional methods that are well established today. So SMS, A2P SMS, we all know about it. It's driving our industry. Essentially, the SMS will communicate from the business. It will route through one or many providers and get to the end user and communicate a one-time password or a PIN. That also can be done by voice. That's been around a good bit as well. Rather than use SMS, a voice call is established and those digits are read out to the end user. There is newer methods also addressing the same area, mobile identity. This is more of a seamless approach. In that case, the network is providing the identity either through APIs or is through header enrichment on the data session when that user is engaged with an enterprise through the handset itself. We've also seen WhatsApp being used to deliver one-time passwords. That's emerging, especially last year and this year. And then we finally have what's the topic for today is what's known as flash calling. So what is a flash call? Let's look at the user journey. So I've taken the case here, it's used mainly by social media companies and OTT apps. And what's important to say here is the user has installed the app and he has given it permissions during the install to access the call log of the device. So here we have a typical case from Telegram, and the user is doing a sign up, typical screen layout, enters his number, he then clicks the next step, and then he's just simply told there will be a call that's going to be terminated to his device. He's not to do anything, and that's the end of the process. So this is a case of successful mobile number verification using flash call from an end user point of view. If this was a fraudulent case, if somebody tried to do it fraudulently, that flash call would land. If say I was to do it to try and hijack the Telegram account of somebody I didn't like, that flash call would land on their device, and it wouldn't verify the number, and the app wouldn't start up with the alleged number. What's happening behind the scene with this flash call? So the app will typically engage with its backend, the backend of Telegram in the previous case. It then makes the flash call is sent to the device, to the number that's entered by the user, and in the CLI of the flash call, somewhere is contained the one-time password or the PIN digits, which the app knows where to retrieve those from the CLI, and it's got, as I said, has got access to the call log, and then it can go and verify the number exactly like it does if it had been an SMS. What's happening at the business level from a flow point of view? Here we see that in the SMS case, the one-time password, again, the enterprise or the social media company will make a contract with an SMS provider like Infobip. It could be anybody, and then the SMS provider will deliver that SMS with the one-time password. It will look up the mobile network operator of the end user, use its connections to get that SMS delivered. In this case, as most operators are monetizing A2P SMS with a per event charge, the operator earns a revenue, as does the SMS provider, and ultimately the enterprise pays for the service. In the case of flash call, what's happening today is again the same process. The social media company will use it has decided to use flash call for this particular destination. It has a partner providing the flash call service. They will deliver the flash call, again determining which network is the end user associated with, and delivers it normally via the international circuits on towards the end user. The difference here is, and this is, I'm talking about the default situation in most MNOs, because it's a missed call and calls are charged by duration, not by event. There is a zero revenue for the MNO in most cases, using the default charging mechanism. So, how many flash calls are we seeing? So Juniper kindly has done a lot of research in this. So last year, it was really in 2021 that flash calls began to emerge. and it came to the attention of MEF. But Juniper has done some good research in this, and according to them, this market could grow to 128 billion flash calls by the year 2026. They're remarkable numbers. But what's happening for MNOs? So some MNOs, and I'll show some examples later, some MNOs are already experiencing an A2P SMS traffic drop due to this use of this channel, because it basically takes the mobile number verification transaction from SMS to voice. And this is particularly seen in international A2P SMS in this particular segment. So let's look at international A2P SMS. So Infobip has done its own research, and we looked at international SMS across 3 different regions, and looked at to segment the use cases of international A2P SMS. So as we can see, the main use case is one-time password or verification or 2FA. So we can see it's dominantly, approximately across the 3 regions, if you average it, it's about 85% of international SMS is one-time passwords. The rest is concerned with notifications on bank transactions or airlines or other services, but the dominant use case is one-time password. Where have we seen some examples of impact that Infobip has seen? One case, Africa. So again, in 2021, at the start, the A2P traffic was growing on its normal, let's say, in most markets, it's growing about 15% compound level. What happened in May was that a decrement was seen, and we also seen this decrement was diagnosed to be due to flash calls. And this on some particular mobile apps, and we can see the trend in this particular network. So overall, a 13% decrement. Another use case in a different region of the world, in Eurasia, again, somewhat a bit earlier in 2021. Again, but here the decrement is more profound. Why is that? It's because their A2P market was dominated by 1 or 2 brands their top brands who decided to migrate to flash call. So clearly for MNOs, this is they need to assess this situation, at least some of them. So what should they do? Again, it's great that we're doing here an awareness session, because we are still in awareness. So what we would propose is that they would assess their situation. They can work with their A2P partners, or if they have an A2P internal managed service team, to just determine the level of flash calls in their network. And there's ways of doing that. They can look at their brands, especially the social media apps, and look at their trends on that. If there is some impact, then they need to do somewhat more. And that is to get more real-time visibility and real-time control mechanisms onto the voice channel. And they also need to think about mobile number verification and define a strategy around that, because MNOs do have a key asset. It's a trusted asset in how that number can be verified. They provide a trusted channel for that. So that could be SMS only, or they may think about adding flash code into that as a channel for that verification method. Real-time control, what does that mean? It is exactly like SMS. When A2P SMS was building out, it only became successful for MNOs once they put SMS firewalls in place. we see pretty much the same thing for flash call. So real-time control using real-time voice firewalls, and these voice firewalls, these can sit in between, at the edge of the network, between the external sources of voice traffic, and protecting or at least monitoring the voice traffic as it enters the network. And this allows the MNO to have visibility. The capabilities of a voice firewall, again, similar to SMS, it has filtering logic, it will have detection logic, it'll have some machine learning to learn what's a flash call or what's a real P2P call. And obviously the whole area of analytics then to give more insight into the voice traffic. So what are the benefits of real-time control? It definitely will give the MNO the ability to detect in real time the levels of flash call. It will also allow them to have some insight analysis on volumes, who is using flash calls, which brands are using it, what's their revenue impact. But most importantly, it will allow an MNO to define its strategy and implement its strategy. So you can define its strategy, but it can only implement it with a voice firewall. And that can be, depending on their strategy, they may want to focus purely on A2P SMS, so they will have to protect that channel by either disrupting flash calls or blocking them, or they may wish to monetize flash calls. In that case, they will need to set up partnerships with different providers. That could be either A2P SMS provider or other providers to monetize this channel. There would be some challenges. Obviously, one of the big things is by default, it's the whole charging area. So a charging mechanism would need to be put in per event for flash call. And we hear about some regulatory issues, especially around the filtering of calls. So these would need also to be assessed by an MNO. Operating a voice firewall, we also believe operating an integrated voice and SMS firewall will also give the MNO a complete and cohesive protection solution for this ecosystem of mobile number verification. So it provides multi-channel overview of what's happening, because traffic may churn from one channel to another. So that's the end of my presentation. The intention was to stimulate discussion, to give you a background, give you an awareness of what it is and what it means for MNOs. So I'll just hand back to James.
John, thank you very much indeed for that presentation. Education is key to this. Now, we saw those figures. Sam, I'm going to bring you in from Juniper Research. Hello, we can see you for the first time. A very warm welcome.
Hello.
Would you like just to introduce yourself and Juniper Research? And the weather looks very good wherever you are at the moment. Where are you?
I'm just outside of London. The weather is, getting warmer, which is finally for the UK. I'm head of analytics and forecasting here at Juniper Research. I head up all our data output. I'm also one of the authors of our flash calling report and quite a lot of our mobile messaging and business messaging reports as well. And as you said, we've been looking into flash calling and what that means for the overall messaging market itself.
Now, the numbers you quoted, thinking, going to go up 2,500%, literally transaction volumes in the billions. And if I'm not correct, that would make A2P flash calling bigger than SMS in terms of transaction volumes if we move forward to 2026. Then how realistic is it for mobile operators to really come to terms with this issue of A2P voice flash in your perspective, given there's still so many mobile operators out there who aren't effectively monetizing SMS? And isn't it a similar market to where A2P SMS was, but just 10 years ago?
That's exactly correct. You look at what SMS firewalls have done for the mobile messaging market over the last 10 years, and how much messaging traffic now goes through them compared to what it was 10 years ago. Obviously, that means that the grey route messaging traffic that operators were losing money to now is becoming even further reduced. But you just need to look at the motivations for why some brands and enterprises were using grey route traffic, masquerading A2P traffic as P2P traffic to essentially pay less for operators to terminate the message. And it's very, very similar to why you see brands and enterprises moving towards flash calling now. Is the fact that they obviously want to pay less, they want to minimize their own costs. But with flash calling, it is a case that operators will need to start looking into how this is impacting their market, impacting their networks, and what that means for their messaging revenues as well. But when it comes to the numbers, we forecast A2P business messaging in trillions. So 128 billion, it does represent a massive part of their potential revenue. So monetizing it is certainly something that identifying it before monetizing it is obviously the first step, and that certainly needs to happen if more and more enterprises are going to be going down the A2P voice route.
Okay, and now just turn to Igor, who's sitting right next to me. I don't have to speak too loudly to talk to you. You have the pleasure of dealing with everything anti-fraud at LANCK Telecom. So you're absolutely immersed in this area. You literally travel the world. You talk to mobile operators all around the world. How much knowledge is there on this topic, and how far down the line are they at understanding, actually, this is an issue we've really got to get a handle on?
Well, obviously the operators are well aware about flash calls because, as the presentation showed, it directly cannibalizing the SMS traffic. The A2P is where the business sat essentially with SMS, and cannibalizing it to another channel is, it's pretty obvious. What difference the operators would have around the world is that how they expect this issue to be treated. Obviously, some operators are willing to say it out loud that they would like to bill it. That they understand that there's a clear need for enterprises to deliver those one-time passwords in the most efficient way and the most reliable way and the cost-efficient way as well. And they see that the service itself must stay there. It's just that right now they, since this is essentially a call attempt with no latency, they aren't getting paid, and they, even though their infrastructure is being used, and it's understandable that they would like to change it, to change the state of things, and some operators are just flat out expecting the flash call traffic to be blocked. This is one case that we obviously saw and discussed with some operators, that they just don't want to see this traffic because they see the revenue that A2P SMSs are bringing to them. The other case that we saw in North America, where there's a particular operator that just labels the suspicious calls as spam likely. We saw the case where the flash calls, generated flash calls, would be labeled as such, thus decreasing the trust to the channel of delivery of those one-time passwords. So there's a difference in that, and I don't want to get into the further discussion because there are subjects that I would be introducing later on. So yeah, this is that. There's several different perspectives, but obviously the operators are there to change how things done right now.
It really does sound to me as though we really are 10 years ago where we were with A2P SMS, but with voice flash in terms of the approach. John, voice and fraud has been around since time immemorial. People think grey routes, SIM farms and everything come and are around simply because of SMS. That's not true. It was all because of voice, and SMS frauds in many ways are very replicating the voice side of things. But A2P voice flash comes with a certain amount of complexity, and how easy is it for voice experts to really detect A2P voice flash and then be able to monitor it and control it and ultimately monetize it? How easy is it? And can firewall solutions, voice firewalls specifically, whether they be standalone or integrated, really be effective?
Yeah, it's a very good question, James. As you mentioned, there's been a lot of the whole fraud or anti-fraud industry started first in the voice domain, but those systems were built mainly on data analytics. Were not built on real-time processing of voice calls. So, in order to be effective on flash call, that's one reason why we're saying it can't be done using offline type systems. This won't be effective at all. So it would require some real-time system to at least be able to detect what's called a flash call. This is in itself will present challenges because it's slightly different to SMS. And SMS is a lot more, let's say, properties that can indicate it's a fraud. For example, that in grey routing, we often see that the content of the message is obfuscated. The CLI is changed. There's global titles or least global titles. What's known as least global titles are being used. With the voice channel, there's somewhat less properties to form a fraud decision on. This is certainly going to be the case. But we do believe that there's things around number reputation, number attestation, trend analytics, machine learning, which can lead to detection of levels of flash call traffic. If an MNO wants to has a strategy of protecting his SMS revenue, there is enough there to disrupt the channel. You can modify, for example, the CLI digits in a suffix just to disrupt the channel if the MNO decided to do that. So it is possible in our opinion.
Okay, thank you, John. Sam, what about the user experience? Because there are multiple reasons why people are, or enterprises or organizations are using A2P Flash for authentication purposes. What's the user experience like with A2P Voice Flash compared to, for example, SMS?
Well, I think the interesting thing to know is we're all familiar with how it works over SMS. You get the password, you type it into whatever service you're trying to authenticate yourself for. Flash calling obviously is far simpler. You get the call, you request to be authenticated. You get the call, you don't even pick up the phone, you don't even notice. It gets authenticated essentially automatically. There are slight differences between Android and iOS. For Android, it is a little bit simpler, and for iOS, you still do have that manual entry. But even when you still have to enter it manually, it's still essentially the same process. So from a user's point of view, I think the only thing that a brand or enterprise might be slightly wary of implementing it is, are users accustomed to it? But the growth we're already seeing in the market makes me believe that that users are already getting accustomed to it. They understand that getting a flash call is easier. They know that they have to, in the most instances, they have to do less. So the user experience really for voice is far simpler and easier to take on board essentially and to learn from it.
Okay, so that's really positive. And what we want to hear is that A2P Voice Flash isn't just fraud related, because I've heard so many times from different people thinking and actually voicing to me, and I've been around conversations where there's this attitude that it should just be buried. And Igor, you mentioned it, you approach some mobile operators that think it should just be blocked, it should be buried. And that's exactly where A2P SMS was 10, 15 years ago with some operators. I've got examples running through my head now where they just literally failed to terminate A2P SMS because they saw no value in it at the time. So, Igor, from what you're seeing, there's definitely a case clearly from what John has been saying, Sam has been saying, that there's an opportunity here for mobile network operators to monetize this solution. How should they go about doing it?
Well, the kind of like my personal judgment is that the presenters are totally right in telling that there must be a clear-cut billing solution that would identify the call, those flash calls, and just make sure that it works for all the parties involved, operators, service providers, enterprises, in the most efficient way, because there's obviously value in this technology. The thing is, and maybe partially the operators are very, very reluctant to kind of onboard this, not only from the billing standpoint, it's just recognizing and detecting it using the wonderful technology that InfoBip has, and using AI and machine learning. I mean, those are integral parts of a good fraud management system. If you can detect those flash calls, this would be a necessary part of the solution of getting operators on board. The thing is, there also must be changes in the billing, because it's not just you recognize something that is going on in your traffic, etc. You must also adjust your billing sequence to do this automatically recognize the flash calls that are going on, as addressing the right partners. Hey, what's going on? These are flash calls, etc. And also, it must be a legally recognized service from the operator's standpoint, because they cannot charge for something that is not in the contract. Obviously, there must be some legal things that could be introduced in the contract between the MNOs and the telecom market players. But also, I could underline that since you will have the legal relation with the companies that would be legally terminating flash calls on some networks out there, this fraud management system that would be recognizing the traffic of flash calls and allowing to legally bill them would also be on guard for those, not so honest parties that would like to go around the existing security measures, and with companies that are legally providing on those two operators and their enterprises, with operators being in the food chain. The fraud management systems would be used to counter those that still would like to go rogue.
Okay. Igor, thank you. John, it's very, very clear that mobile number verification is a massive topic. It's a huge business area, with so many transactions having moved online, so many payments having moved online, so many businesses, financial services providers. They need to have faith that we are who we say we are. It's all about know your customer. So what other channels are you seeing out there potentially emerging for mobile number verification? Because there are quite a few, aren't there?
Yes, as I mentioned in the presentation earlier, WhatsApp is, we've seen traffic on WhatsApp channel, which is not an MNO channel, but it is a channel still to the device. The question is, there is some businesses using WhatsApp. The question is, will other social media companies use WhatsApp as that channel? WhatsApp themselves are working on some better user experience, because with the WhatsApp channel, you have to retrieve the user has to retrieve the OTP from the app and put it into the whatever other social media app is using the verification solution. Just to go back to it, Android is also working on SMS. It's also making that experience better. And there's other channels are potentially emerging. I mentioned mobile identity, which is more of a seamless experience, but it requires that the user is actually engaged using the mobile itself as the interactive session between him and the enterprise. So there's many channels, as well as 5G is looking at this area. There's a service in 5G called ACMA, which is what the network itself, the mobile network, providing a more seamless API for enterprises to use to literally in the area of number authentication.
Fantastic, John. Sam, we've had the pleasure of being on a number of panels talking about this issue over the past year. Could I just have closing remarks from you? We're coming to the end of this session. And how big an opportunity do you think this is for mobile operators to actually take back more revenue for themselves when it comes to the world of mobile number verification?
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity. I think that the arguments between either blocking or monetizing it will soon sway more towards monetizing the traffic rather than blocking it in a similar way that SMS did. And from that point onwards, I think the strategies that operators need to implement are obviously when they identify, making sure there's enough data to monetize it. And more importantly, as this is a new service and voice is making a resurgence, operators just need to make sure that their P2P voice traffic isn't impacted by the way they go about A2P voice, making sure that customer experience still remains the same and it's not blocking legitimate traffic.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to make. Voice has been around since 1876. Mobile operators still make a lot of money from P2P voice, so that channel needs to be protected as well. So I think summarizing everything up to this point, we agree it's an opportunity. A2P voice flash is not just a threat, something to be buried, as you were talking about, Igor. And from a mitigation perspective, what we can do as a community is to get the message across to mobile operators. They need to have an SMS firewall, they need to have a signaling SS7 firewall, and you need to have a voice firewall. Whether it's one and the same, doing everything, or separate ones, they need to embrace the opportunity. So I understand, I'm sure there are going to be quite a few questions online. I remember the last time I ran a panel on this, I had 27 questions. We don't have time for 27 questions. Ross.
You have 3.
Well, okay, 3. Well, I've got 3 for the moment.
All right, so we are
very quick.
Yeah, we'll go very quick for these. So first one is flash call authentication is common in markets where ATP price is higher. Is higher ATP price encouraging for the use of flash calls by enterprises?
Oh, I mean, obviously you would go for the flash call if the economy would be there, and the more you save on using a different path of delivering those one-time passwords, it could be instead of a flash call, you can substitute with any other channel, which would make financial sense. That could be OTT, that maybe could be push notifications, etc. It's just that the flash call, since the reach of mobile network is that better than obviously the reach of Wi-Fi or any other data channel, then the flash call is the way to go.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, go to in the room. We've got Uku Tomikas, Chief Connectivity Officer of Macente. Go for it.
Everyone, thanks. So my main question really was about the adoption speed, and you threw out the number of 60 million calls last year, 26 billion in a few years. You also threw out one data point last year in November, which was in 2022 there'll be 5 billion flash calls made. So 6 months down, how far are we? Are we close to 5 billion or are we still in the millions?
Sam.
Yeah, I don't think we're quite approaching the 5 billion market yet. When these numbers were produced by Juniper Research, one of the things we did was we went to the few number of service providers that were looking into auditing networks, operator networks, and their voice traffic using voice firewalls. Having spoken to them recently, I think maybe that forecast was slightly optimistic. It's still got potential to reach a traffic of 128 billion by 2026, but yeah, I think the 5 billion it may be slightly lower now. Maybe the growth hasn't hit the markets, hit the growth rates that we thought it would 6 or 7 months ago.
I think Ross.
What we've seen.
Sorry, John, go for it.
Yeah, what we've seen is once it onsets, in some markets we've seen it level off the flash calling, so you think that it would continue to decrement. We believe there's still a quality issue. So we're trying to fully understand this. Is there a quality issue that is not bringing that increase in flash calling? Once an app adopts it should get more and more because through app updates. And one question could be, because it requires the end user to give permissions. This is an essential factor. With SMS, you don't have the permission dependency. You can always do the copy and paste without permissions. So I think we might see, as we progress throughout the year and into next year, more definite numbers on this.
Okay, thank you, John. Ross, we don't have time for any more questions. We've already run over. Yeah. Thank you to everyone online for the questions and your engagement. And that brings to the end this A2P Voice Flash InfoBip sponsored panel. I'd like to thank Sam from Juniper Research back in the UK, John joining us from Ireland, and Igor, I was going to say my colleague, feels like I see you so often at events, Igor sitting right next to me here in Amsterdam. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, everyone.